It's weird that I'm like more nervous about the live video than I am about the podcast.
I can turn this around so it's not actually facing us.
No, it's okay. Hello. Okay, all right. So let's get into this. Yeah, I'll just record it.
It's Wakely Properties, by the way.
That actually is okay.
Yeah, that's no, just Wakely, not Ben.
Oh, just Wakely Properties.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm like, oh, you think I've written things?
It's written on the sign out in front of your house.
Is it really?
Of course it is.
Yeah. I just looked at your email. I'll work on that. Hello and welcome to Money Chats with Bounce Financial. I'm your host, Ben Brett. And if you haven't listened to this podcast before, this is the podcast that helps professional families who are navigating life's big financial transitions. We're talking all things like buying homes, having children, dealing with maternity leave. So if that sounds like you, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and why not check us out on Instagram at Bounce Financial. Today I'm joined by Thomas Cousins. How are you, Thomas?
I'm really good, thanks, and thanks for having me here.
I'm really excited to have Thomas on today. Thomas is a real estate agent with Wakely Properties. He has extensive experience in the industry. He's also my personal real estate agent, which I think is a vote of confidence.
Certainly is.
And he's bought me coffee today, so he's done all the right things.
Yeah, you got to mark all the boxes.
I asked Thomas to send me through a little bit about his background, a little bit about him, and he's flicked through sort of his bio. And I couldn't agree with it more, to be honest. I've engaged Thomas twice as a real estate agent, now for my second home, and his bio sort of talks about how he's undeniably focused and exceptionally determined. And I think that really is reflective of my view of Thomas. He provides you with the confidence in knowing you've selected a premium service, adding value to the sale of your property. And confidence is key when it comes to selling your property. It's one of your biggest assets, so I definitely agree with that. Thomas has over a decade of residential property experience, including advising me during that decade, and comes with a significant and extraordinary real estate background. His knowledge and commitment to providing the highest level of service available in the marketplace is proven with his loyal clients remaining in contact years after the sale has completed, which is very reflective of the experience I've had.
Has happened.
Excellent. So essentially I've got Thomas on today to talk through, just coming a bit closer, talk through, I guess, what you're looking for when you're getting a real estate agent. You know, for a lot of our clients, perhaps they've sold a property before, or maybe they haven't, or alternatively they're buying a property. And Thomas and I spoke about this a bit earlier in the week, in that in very few instances as Australians do we really negotiate a lot. We're not really a negotiating culture. No. We don't go to the shops and negotiate things. We don't we do a little bit when we buy when we start a job, but we actually don't really negotiate much. And when it comes to buying your home or selling your home, suddenly we're negotiating our largest asset. So having a person in your corner that can help you makes a lot of sense. So I kind of wanted to get Thomas on today to talk through some of the things that you want to look for when you're picking a real estate agent, and some of the things that, tips and traps. So, Thomas, sorry, I won't keep banging on. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? Talk about how you got into real estate.
Well, I suppose, like a lot of people, I didn't go to school and decide to learn how to become a real estate agent. It's one of those career paths I think that you tend to fall into. And fortunately enough, I fell into it at the beginning of the global financial crisis. So I actually genuinely mean fortunately, because I think if you can learn a craft in a tough environment like that, you can kind of deal with just about anything. And,
yes.
We've experienced a very interesting marketplace over the last 12 months, and I think, in honesty, my experience in that GFC time has really made it a very manageable experience versus I know a lot of people within the industry were pretty anxious about it. But anyway, I digress, as I do, so you'll become aware of that as this podcast goes on.
You actually had an interesting career prior to starting in real estate. Why don't you talk about that?
So yeah, well, I actually straight out of school. In fact, throughout school, I was in the kitchen washing dishes. They call that role a dish pig, by the way. So I was a dish pig throughout my high school, and then started my chef apprenticeship actually the day that I finished year 12. So I graduated Had my ceremony at about 11 o'clock in the morning and started my first shift as an apprentice chef at 3 o'clock that afternoon. And so that's where I was in the kitchen for the next 10 years, which is a great career path for travel, for creativity, for discipline, hierarchy, the tradition of it. I loved it. But yes, I was a chef all around Australia for about 10 years.
Yes. I think what I really like, so I've spoken with Thomas a bit this week about his history as a chef, and what I really like, I guess, about the training you would receive as a chef is really having good process, being very prepared for the unexpected, the unexpected 100 extra people who decide to show up and demand the meal you didn't expect they would order. So you learn to roll with the punches, and I imagine it comes through in your real estate all the time.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that you it's a skill that you're able to transfer, is preparedness, I suppose, in that in the kitchen, it's very traditional French kitchen brigades and kitchen terminology and tradition. So the list of things that you need to have prepared is called mise en place.
Yes.
And it roughly translates to everything in its place. And that's a skill that I've taken with me everywhere I've gone, is that I am prepared for any situation. I mean, you saw my little box of tricks that I brought to the open home.
Yes.
And it's got everything from a tape measure, because the old man who wants to tap on walls and measure car parks is catered for, but also everything down to batteries for air conditioner remotes in the event that the air conditioner's not working and it's a hot day. So I'm ready for any situation. Now, I've had that bag. In fact, I probably need to replace them because they've been in there so long and I haven't used them, but I'm ready for it.
I love it. Okay, so in terms of selling real estate, do you have anything you specialize in? Do you have like a certain type of home or certain area, or?
Look, I mean, it's good to specialise in an area, and that's to get some good knowledge of things like schools and transport.
Yes.
And there's a lot of suburb snobbery, and knowing which postcode is going to attract a higher price, and also as far as which side of the suburb or which side of the street or which part of the area is going to attract a higher price and for what reasons traditionally, versus just kind of lobbing up in a different area code or whatever.
Yes.
Randomly and just putting a house on the market. You've got to have a little bit of knowledge about those things, otherwise you risk either underpricing the property significantly and putting a ceiling on it and costing the owner money,
Yes.
or on the flip side of that, and just as dangerous, by significantly overpricing it, meaning that people aren't going to come through as readily, and you're likely to sit on the market longer and therefore cost money
Yes.
as well. So having that sort of specialty in an area or a general area is important. Specialising in a type of property, I suppose really the ones that I don't kind of get too involved with these days are commercial properties. Some properties have got a commercial element and a residential element, and that's fine, but purely commercial properties, there are specialists in that field, and I tend to refer to those guys. Off the plan, that's a different skill set altogether, and for those who don't know what off the plan is, it's a project or a property that hasn't been built yet, and it's being sold from the potential or the renders or the plans available. So essentially you don't have a home or a product to walk somebody through. You're showing them pictures on the computer and trying to get them to fall in love with that. So
Yes.
those two sides of things I don't tend to get too much into, but residential resale, units, townhouses, houses, blocks of land, blocks of units, that sort of thing is right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. So if people don't have a Thomas, if they don't have easy access to a Thomas and they're trying to pick a real estate agent, what would you be looking for in a real estate agent? Would you be looking for somebody who perhaps you've been referred to? Would you be looking for somebody who really specialises in your local area? Like, what are some of the key things you would look for?
Well, I mean, there's if you've got somebody who you trust that is referring that person, then that's always a bonus. I mean, you don't necessarily want to roll entirely on that, in that you want to ask, what's the agenda behind this referral as well, because quite often within a real estate space, there's a referral fee paid to people who refer properties. or refer listings. Like is a property that's for sale as a listing. Prefer listings. There can be a fee involved. So if you trust that person implicitly, then absolutely you want to speak to that real estate agent. But I even if you've got that, I still suggest speaking to a couple of agents. I don't know if you did that.
I didn't.
Terrible mistake. No, I suggest speaking to a couple of real estate agents, and it's not that you're trying to put one against the other and find what the best commission structure is or the lowest marketing fee is or who quotes the highest price. You want to get a feel for who knows the area, like I was talking about, who's got the kind of nuances about the area down. Is there a track record? Have they sold properties in that area? Or is there a bit of a database behind that as well? So could they potentially bring buyers through? What I am very big on, and we were just talking about this before, is how visible is this agent on social media?
Yeah.
Now, it used to be the case that your passive audience was looking at newspapers, and that's really just not the case anymore to any significant degree anyway. Whereas if you look at the audiences for the major social media platforms and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, I'm not leaving out TikTok for any other reason that I don't actually understand it yet. But the audiences for those are enormous and they're constant. So your newspaper client is going to be looking at that potentially once. They'll read about you in the newspaper, maybe on the Saturday when they get it, and then that newspapers lining the cat trade the next day.
Yes.
Whereas if you're actively engaged in social media, then you can be in front of that person or that group of people every day.
Yes.
And so having that visibility is very important. So I get inquiries through my social media channels, not even necessarily about properties, just because they know that I'm out there in the marketplace and can I help them with whatever they're doing, buying or selling. So visibility is important. You kind of get to know, to a degree, a person as well, from how they are on social media. Not everybody is themselves on social media, of course, but you get a bit of an idea, and then you can kind of meet up with that person and see if the audio matches the video, so to speak. Finding somebody that you trust in and believe has got your interests at heart, not necessarily just their own.
Do you have an opinion on how many real estate agents you would see? Like, how many is too many and how many is perhaps too little?
Well, I'd say you probably want to at least compare two. I think that you want to keep comparing them until you find one that you actually believe in and trust. So if you've compared two because you think that that's what you have to do and you're choosing between not so good and terrible, that's not where you want to be. So if you have to speak to 15 agents before you find one that you click with, then that's what you do. But I think that you want to be at least comparing a couple to make sure that what you're being told is it seems to be relatively consistent. There's always going to be differing opinions on what's the best method of sale, but evidence is key, right? So can you show me, you're telling me that an auction's the right method of sale? Well, show me your last 10 auctions and how they've panned out for you. Show me your last 10 private treaty sales and how they've panned out for you. And not that you shouldn't be giving someone a go. New agents, everyone's got to start somewhere, but you want to see a bit of track record as well.
Yes.
This is, you touched on it. It's most likely for most people is the biggest asset that they'll ever own. And some people will only buy and sell maybe once or twice in their entire lives. So you want to have somebody who you trust implicitly with the entire process, the entire experience. And you can get some very enthusiastic new agents come in, and that's great, and the energy is infectious, but can they actually back it up? And that's where the evidence comes into it.
Yeah, I think, in terms of picking a real estate agent, I think in terms of trust is so important, right? Yes, overlaying your opinion and trying to understand, does this align with the way I feel about these things makes sense? But there is a sense, there is a moment where you need to accept that there's things that this real estate agent knows that you just have no way of knowing. They're working in it every day. They can see changes in the buyer's behaviors, in market behaviors on a day-to-day basis. Little things can change the market, and they need to be able to change the the strategy of how they're selling or change how they're pricing or whatnot, and having somebody that you implicitly trust to be able to see those movements, who perhaps has some experience seeing those movements over time and knowing, in this market an auction will do well, or in this market, we need to put a price up or not put a price up. I can see the logic in that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I don't think you really answered my question, but how many how many is too many? At what point do you think you've seen too many real estate agents?
Again, there really isn't a number, because you've got to be comfortable with the person. And if you've spoken to 10 terrible agents, it doesn't mean you have to choose one of those.
Yeah.
There are good agents out there. It's the same, and I'm not putting any dirt on the industry. It's the same in every industry. In financial planning, there's some scumbags out there as much as there is some fantastic operators like yourselves. So, it's how many financial planners should you see? I
think the answer I'm trying to get out of you is if you do one really good interview and you're really happy with him, feel free to hire him. There's no
look, and that is the case. If you've got a really good feel for somebody, you've done the due diligence, you've seen the evidence. In your case, you'd worked with me before, so you knew that was what you were what to expect to a degree. But if you're going into this cold, if you've had a really good interview with somebody, look, still have a chat with somebody else. At least speak to another agent and just get a different feel for it. Don't buy into the lower fee, the lower marketing. Don't make your decisions based on the person who quotes the highest price. It's a common trap in real estate. In fact, there's even a name for it. It's that common. So
what's the name?
So they call it buying the listing. From an agent point of view, they quote a higher price, so they're buying the listing.
Yes.
And then they go through a process of what they call educating the vendor. So you as the homeowner are the vendor, and by educating, that means bringing negative feedback about the high expectation that you've given them until they submit to a price that's actually realistic, which is probably what the first agent told you in the beginning. So that's why it can be dangerous. In fact, it's such a good idea to do your own research first. Some really good tools for that are the sold galleries on realestate.com.au and domain.com.au, because they are the sold prices. That's the fact. It's not just me beating my chest and telling you that I've sold everything in the area. You can have a look and see which agents have actually sold a lot in that area. You can see what the sold prices are of properties that are going to be relatively or genuinely comparable to yours.
Yes.
And that's difficult because, as you know, buying real estate or houses, there's no two homes that are identical. Even if they're in an estate and they're built to the same floor plan, they're still in a different position on the street. So there's a different value proposition there, regardless if they're next door to each other or not. So all you can do is give yourself a guide by looking at that. But being educated means that you're less likely to fall for the agent that's quoting you a high price to win you over and educate you at some point in the future.
Which probably leads us on to the next part of this. So we've found an agent, we're comfortable with them, we feel like they're quoting an appropriate price, we feel like we can trust them. And then I guess it comes down to comparing the cost of the agent. Obviously different agents cost different things.
Yep.
And I'm a big fan sometimes of you get what you pay for, but understanding what it is you get for that value is quite helpful. So first of all, how do different agents charge? Like, what is the way they structure their charging, and what are some of the things you should be looking for when selling your property?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because there's so many different ways of selling property now. So it goes all the way from where you can do everything yourself. There's a lot of for sale by owner companies out there that allow you to do everything yourself, and they just provide the access to the major portals, some of the marketing material, etc. So you pay them the fee for their product, and then you do everything yourself. So it's probably from a few $100s. And then you've got full service, and then some, which can be, I've actually seen commission rates up to 4.8%, which I think's my value more so than theirs, which I think is exorbitant. But
it's quite high. Yes.
The usual rate that you'll see from most agents is between 2 and 3%.
Yes.
There are companies that specifically work on discount rates of 1%, or there's fixed fee agencies that will charge a specific amount of money regardless of the sale price. and you've got every end of the spectrum there. So should you choose the cheapest if they're the best? Yes. Should you choose the most expensive? Same answer.
Yeah.
So it comes down to the due diligence you've done before, who you feel comfortable with. It's a value proposition. So being more concerned with what you get by way of final sale price and experience through the process than what you are with what you're paying the agent, providing it's not a difference of that 5% what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Providing we're talking about a few $1,000s, it's a very good agent with your interests in mind will make that up and then some.
Yeah.
Right. So what you're dealing with in the cheaper agencies with the free marketing or the discount fee or whatever that looks like, it's basically turning that transaction into just that, a transaction. It's a volume-based business. You need to have multiple transactions to make that business operate versus a 2 to 3% agency with marketing costs on top, where you're essentially you're funding your own marketing package. That agency can operate effectively with a lower number of properties for sale, meaning that they're giving the sellers of each of those properties a better service and are able to work more effectively with the buyers to create a better outcome.
Yeah, I think so. We spoke about this briefly, and you mentioned to me, the concept that you really only get one go. You get one go to sell it, and when you've sold it, that's it. You can't go back later on and be like, you know what, actually, I think that was a bad strategy and I think I could get more money. So I guess in picking the right, price is always important, no doubt about that, but it can't be your sole consideration. It really needs to be put in place, because if you walk away from this, even if you're pretty happy with what you get, but the question remains, could I have got more? Or, was this a good job? You don't want to live with that. You don't want to live knowing that, you put yourself back that much.
No. Well, put it this way. How do you feel when you go somewhere and you buy a coffee and it's a bad coffee and you spend $5 on a coffee and you're not really super satisfied with it? That annoys me.
Yes.
Right now,
quite a lot.
Scale that up. This is a great coffee, by the way.
Wonderful.
Scale that up to circa $1 million transaction and walking away from that. Imagine the taste in your mouth after that. So making sure that you're comfortable with the agent that you've chosen, the method that they're employing or methods. And you mentioned something really important before, is the ability to change strategy on a dime if you have to.
Yeah. Right.
So it's being able to kind of assess the situation and make a move from there, knowing that all of those things have happened. The money that you, or the final sale price that you get, you can be 100% certain, and I'll use this specifically, on the day, that was the best outcome available, because you never know, the market might boom the next day, it might crash the next day, but on the day, with the methods that we've employed, the buyers that we've had through, the marketing that we've done, the net we've expanded out there, we are 100% certain that the number that you have accepted today is the best that was in the market.
Yes.
So, yeah, you have to be satisfied with that. If you're not, like you say, you only get one shot at it. You can't go back and ask for more later.
I follow your social media. Thomas is prolific on social media, puts a lot up, and really educational stuff too. So if you are looking to learn more about real estate, you want to know more about it, you have an interest, it's a really great... How can they follow you, actually? What's the...
At Thomas_Cousins.
Yes, I will revisit that at the end if you missed it. But essentially, I watched a video of yours the other day where you talked about a change in strategy that you've employed lately. And so when we're recording this, it's January 2021. I think maybe you recorded this video in December 2020. It's a very strange property market. There's a lot of buying demand and not a lot of sellers around. And you sort of talked about a change in strategy you've been employing about putting prices up or not putting prices up. Do you want to just talk about that?
Yeah, look, that's interesting, because ever since I started in real estate, which was in, like I said, in the GFC, it was 2008, I've been a massive advocate for giving as much information as you possibly can out into the marketplace about a property, and that's making sure the address is there. You see some agencies that will withhold the address, making sure there's a floor plan available, making sure that there's good quality photographs, and what I considered to be most importantly was having a price on there, because we didn't want to be turning any potential buyers away because there just weren't that many of them. You didn't want them to overlook it because there wasn't a price, and they were annoyed by that. And I've been an advocate forever about having a price on there. Now, things have changed in the market. Like you mentioned, there's very low levels of properties for sale. The numbers that we're seeing so for January this year, there's roughly 26% less properties for sale than there was January last year, which there was about 40% less than there was the year before, and traditionally they're on, right? So we're in a very low stock market, and not that we've got a huge amount more buyers, but comparatively to the supply, the demand is very, very strong. And if you look at the reasons behind that, which is probably another conversation for another time, but interest rates are at an all-time low, so there's more people that are able to borrow more money and get out there. So what we find is that if you put a price on a property, and I did touch on it, firstly, you can be wrong with that price, right? So you want to make sure that you're very confident about a price or a range before you put it out there. But if you put a price on a property and the market is that people would be prepared to pay significantly more than that, you're putting a ceiling on that, right? A subconscious ceiling, but a ceiling. So, for example, if we talk round numbers again, we'll talk about $1 million property, right? If we're putting 999,000, as you'll see quite often as a strategy, to be just under the milestone number, and 999,000, that's fine. But if you've got somebody out there that's potentially prepared to pay 1.1, then they're probably going to be paying less. Even though they'll pay above that $1 million mark, they're going to be paying a lower amount because you've put a ceiling on that. You've put a perception of value on there that wasn't there before. Now, at the moment, because we're getting so many people through properties, the market is dictating the price. I know that sounds a bit cliche, but it is 100% the case.
Yeah.
You get enough people in there who have got an interest in the property, the ability to buy, and are ready to make a move. As soon as you see that there's other people interested in the property, stands to reason that they're going to see value in it as well, and you have to extend yourself to a degree to buy that property, and everyone's got a different level of what that actually means.
Yes.
And so while you might get a couple of offers at 970, 980, because you've got a 999 range on there, you might actually end up getting $1 million and $20 million and $30, whereas without that, you might end up with 1.1, 1.15. So none of that, that's all circumstantial, of course, but without that price ceiling on there, you're not limiting what you can potentially get, and you're also not risking overpricing it and scaring people away.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to my comment before about finding someone you trust. Now, in finding someone you trust, you can try and find the person that 100% aligns with the way you think. But it's important to remember the way you think is bound by your understanding of things. So, like a very common thing is a lot of people will ask, perhaps their parents or siblings or friends, it's like, when you sold, what did you do? What was your experience? Oh, we found that it was great to put the price on because we got this. And so you may come into that as a seller, talking to a real estate agent, being like, well, if this guy's not going to put a price on there, he's an idiot. My cousin-in-law did it, and look how great it worked for them. But of course, that person is working in this day in, day out, and they may have changed their strategy to suit the new scenario. So essentially there is an element of trying to find the person you trust, because you do need to have the confidence and to go, I need to outsource this to you. Okay, cool. All right, well, that makes sense. You kind of briefly touched on marketing and additional costs. Now, when selling your home, I understand like a lot of real estate agents give you a lot of option when it comes to marketing. And, say in a market like now where there's actually a lot of buyers, there is a temptation to say, well, do I even need to market my property? Can I just put it on real estate? I'm probably going to get a fair few buyers, maybe, take some pretty average pictures, or what are your thoughts on how heavily you should market a property, and does it change, and what sort of, costs would you be looking at to do? Explain to me your thoughts on this.
Well, I mean, there's limitless really is what can be done. You can have double page spread in the Courier Mail, the front page of the major portals. You can do a $5,000 campaign on social media and all of the above. But it's working out a good mix of effective marketing tools that are the best value for money that are in the marketplace. So the temptation is to undermarket it because the market is strong, right? So I guess the question to answer that question is, which buyers don't you want? Because you've got buyers that are actively out in the marketplace right now and they're looking immediately and they're on the major portals. Then you've got the passive buyers who are would look at a property, they've got the funds available, they'd look at a property if they thought it was good value and they could do it, but they're not actively out there. Then you've got the people who, let's say, for example, you're looking at a property in Wavell Heights, and that's where you've been looking and you haven't expanded your search, but all of a sudden there's a really good opportunity for you a couple of suburbs away that's much better value. Right, so that's there's so many different buyer groups. So if you rely entirely on, let's say you don't market it and you're relying entirely on the agent's database, there's every chance you're going to get a buyer through. There's every chance you're going to get a good result from that. But you're missing the active buyers that are out there refreshing realestate.com every 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
So you're missing those guys. So now, let's say you put it on realestate.com and that only. Well, you've got a lot of buyers in the southern states, Victoria, New South Wales, where Domain is actually, if not the major portal, it's at least neck and neck with realestate.com, that you're potentially missing people that are only searching on that. So do you want to have somebody who sees your property as an absolute giveaway compared to what they're paying for a one-bedroom unit on a main road in just outside of Sydney?
Yes.
Right, so do you do that? Now, we talked about passive buyers. So it used to be that you'd approach your passive buyers through the newspaper. I am actually not a major advocate or an advocate at all of advertising in the newspaper because it's so very expensive for what you actually get. Now, I can get you double the readership of the Courier Mail. Let's blur out specific names of newspapers that I've mentioned. I can get
That's all right. I can legally defend this. We're good.
I can get you double the readership with a quarter of the price, and I can get it more consistently through social media.
Yeah.
So I can be approaching people in their homes when they're face to phone, which is where most people are, even if they've got the TV on in the background. So it's about making sure that you're approaching the widest possible net you can for the best possible value. And you can go as little or as high as you want, but a good agent will have a campaign that is very well rounded, that they can present to you, and they can adjust that accordingly. Having a set campaign that is all you use implies that every property, every situation, every budget is the same. So a cookie cutter approach. So anyone that claims to have a system for selling real estate or anything like that, be very mindful of the fact that your house is completely different to every other house that has been sold or been on the market.
I think it comes back to, I guess, what we talked about before, in that you really don't want to come away from this feeling like maybe you could have done a better job. You want to come away from it knowing that you've given it your best shot. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you need a double spread in the front page of the Courier Mail or whatever. Like, it depends on the value of your house, what your agent's recommending and whatnot, but you just really don't want to undercook. You don't want to save $800 and lose 20 grand. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
And, when it comes to property, small percentages of the value of your property will have a big effect on your finances. So, if you undersell this property by 40 grand, that could be 2 additional years of work and savings to make that back up. So we want to make sure that we're confident we're doing the best we can in that market. Like you said, property does go up and down all the time. And that does get a bit lost, that property does go down sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. You hear people talk about real estate doubling every 7 years. Well, I know enough people who have purchased, say, apartments, and I'll use Portside, Hamilton, for example, and they were buying one-bedroom apartments for $430,000, $440,000, and that was a good 10 years ago. And so it stands to reason that should be worth now $800,000, $880,000, right? Well, they're selling for under $300,000 now. Yeah. So not all property does go up. So anyway, we digress again. I told you I'd do that.
I think it's important. It's important to understand. It's like property is like any asset, any investment. There's a lot more emotion in it, and that's understandable because it's the homes we live in. But we need to be very strategic in the way we go about these things, because you can get them wrong. And if you get them wrong, you're going to feel the effect of it for a very long time. You can perhaps overspend on a couch you buy or something like that. It's not going to have the same effect on your life as getting property wrong. And I guess that's why I want to get you on here to sort of talk about some of those things. Okay, cool. All right, so we sort of talked about some of the strategies, some of the marketing costs. You touched on before that there is an option to potentially nearly sell your house yourself. You could use an agent for a couple of things and then you could sell your house yourself. which I'm sure for a lot of people seems really appealing. You know, they're just like, oh, well, I can maintain control of this. Tell me your thoughts on this and why perhaps that might not be a sensible idea.
Well, I mean, it can be a sensible idea, and if you've spoken to 10 agents like we spoke about and they're all subpar, then perhaps you're better off selling it yourself. And there's plenty of portals and available products around that allow you to do that. My thoughts on it are, and having been in this industry since 2008 and having attempted to sell my own property myself, firstly, I didn't end up selling it, and I employed an agent who I trusted who sold it and got a great price. And I was very happy that I'd done that. So if you've got the time, the negotiation ability, the ability to completely, what's the word I'm looking for, to cut off all ties of emotion from that property, to disassociate yourself with the home and consider it a product, then perhaps you should be selling it yourself. But if you're working, you haven't really had a lot of experience negotiating, you're not familiar with how things can be done around property law and different options around settlements and conditions, then you're definitely better off with a good agent. And I see quite a lot, there's a lot of different ones popping up all the time. The for sale by owner sites on social media, you'll see them come up, and a lot of the commentary around that is, oh, look at all the money I saved on commission. Well, you may have saved $15,000 or $20,000 on commission, but how certain are you that you've had the best marketing campaign to create the demand and the competition and the negotiation that it will actually maximise the price? So if you could have potentially got an extra 30 or 40 groups through the home and created a competitive environment with multiple offers, could you have actually got more in excess of what you believe you saved? And
yes.
The answer is usually yes. Some people have got great results selling by themselves, right? But it is the exception to the rule, in my opinion.
Yeah, I fear you being too generous there and too kind to these sellers selling themselves. I think your story there is quite interesting. So, like we touched on before, that the market's changing all the time. There's different strategies. Even when you sold my prior house 7 or so years ago, 8 years ago, in my current house, your strategy is markedly different because you've had to move with the times, right? So when you sold your personal home, you were aware of all these movements.
Yes.
You knew all these things going, and you still saw the value in having a separate person to smooth that transaction, to have buyers feeling comfortable talking to you openly about the property, talking to you about their fears and concerns. Even you saw the value in it with all that knowledge. And for somebody who's not a real estate agent, who lacks the knowledge and has the emotional ties, and I appreciate that, we want to feel that we can separate our emotions from things, but acknowledging that this is our home, and even if it's your investment property, this is the place you researched, that you envisioned. Okay, this is a great place. This is why this is a great place. You already have some preconceived ideas, and that's going to come through in the way you communicate. So I really, if I have clients that are thinking of selling their own home, I'd really caution them against doing so, because a small amount of savings on the front end of saving on commission, I think, could cost you a lot in the end run. And there's a lot of time involved in it. It's not an easy task selling a house.
No, and look, it does. I'll give you an example actually of one relatively recently. So there was a lady in Ascot who no longer working, had a property that she was trying to sell herself through these for sale by owner portals, and she did get quite a lot of interest about the property, but had no luck in selling it. I then listed the property for sale, and as it happened, somebody who had seen the property when she had it for sale was the eventual purchaser of the property. Now, that person had no intention of buying it because he was getting no genuine communication, no real idea of how things could be done, what the next step was. So while she could have saved money and sold it to somebody, he was by far the best buyer in the marketplace. And it took me, with my ability to actually get an offer from that person, work with them and get the best outcome from them, to actually get the deal done, whereas that would not have happened prior to. So she had it for sale herself, that guy saw it, but didn't buy it.
Yes.
I had it for probably 2 weeks before that guy bought it. Same house.
Yes.
Same price range.
And I think too, if you speak to people who have sold their home, you don't know what you don't know. So they may have felt like they had a positive experience, but they're unaware of perhaps what they've missed out on or what could have happened.
Yeah.
So I could talk to you forever, Thomas. I feel like this could go on for quite some time, but we'll probably finish it up there, and maybe we'll get you back on another time to sort of explore some of these other issues, other topics that I think are quite useful. If people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do so?
So best way is just to contact me on my mobile phone. I can give you the number and put it in the notes if you like, but 0426 455 435. Social media is a great way. I mentioned that before. It's at Thomas_Cousins on Instagram, and Thomas Cousins Property on Facebook.
How do you spell Cousins?
COUSSENS.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, I encourage you to check it out. There's some really useful information. Thomas has some great lives. We're actually live right now, so I can't see if anyone's... Oh, there's a few watching, so that's great. Check him out, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact either of us. Thank you very much for your time today, Thomas.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you for listening, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. See ya.